That's the thing. You know, I used to be obsessed with, I got to close at 30% or convert 30% of my leads or 35% of my leads like so-and-so agent. So whatever your numbers are, hopefully for me, conversion rate 20 to 25% of your direct mail leads or half your presentations. If you can maintain that number at 15 appointments, you want to make more money, well, do 20, 30, 50 a week.
Right.
That's what all the guys who are doing a lot of money or a lot of business are doing, in my experience, is they're working like crazy. And that's what it takes. If you want to have an extraordinary income, you got to have an extraordinary work ethic.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Life Insurance Academy podcast. Today, we've got a very special treat for you. Chris and I are here at remote studio today, and
We're hanging at a buddy's house.
kind of.
It's kind of.
It could be.
Some friends.
It's like your basement.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I don't have all this gear.
We need to build one of these in your basement.
I'm cool with that.
Yes, but we've got a very special guest for you today. The one, the only. This guy is YouTube famous. This guy was putting out content on YouTube before I knew anyone was putting out content on YouTube. Maybe Cody Askins. I think this guy and Cody Askins are probably two of the most consistent YouTube content producers in the industry. The one, the only, David Duford. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks for having us. Clap. I am clapping.
Yeah, let's clap. Can we get applause for there? Can we get an applause track right there for David Duford? David, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, we loved having you on today. So, man, you've been doing content on YouTube now for how long?
2014, I believe, was when I first started.
Yeah.
So it's 2022. Long time.
Yeah, 8 years. There's a lot of...
It's so hard coming up with new content. Let me just say that. It's saying the same thing 20 times.
How often are you putting content out?
Daily.
Every day.
Well, if it works good, you got to keep doing it.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
Weekends?
Weekends too.
Wow. That's great. And let's see if you can remember this. What was your first piece? Do you remember?
Yes, it was. I believe it was talking about the truth behind final expense. Some 40-minute audio overdub, not me on camera, talking about kind of the ups and downs of final expense business, what you should be aware of, and then a pitch to join my agency.
Wow. Now, when did you get in the business?
2011. I had a personal training gym that was going down the tubes because of the Great Recession.
Yep.
And didn't have any job prospects. And when you get desperate, what do?
Go into insurance.
Sell insurance. Exactly.
That's right.
So I stumbled across the final expense business. I liked it.
Yeah.
Low, not technically a big deal. It's very just activity based.
Yes.
Buy leads, see the people, basic stuff, right? So I started doing that, and that's how I got into it.
So you got in, you immediately started having success, so much success that you started a YouTube channel.
No, I had to fail first before that happened. I was doing well for the first year because I listened to what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then, of course, some people, me in this example, think you know more than the experienced pro. So I started doing things differently, marketing differently, and getting away from fundamentals. And that kind of spurred on a whole bunch of issues where ultimately I failed. I had like $90 in the bank. I was sick and tired of seeing final expense prospects, and I was like divorced from it emotionally. And then I got a real job selling uniform services, realized how bad that was working for somebody else.
Yep.
And I needed that, though, to have some humility, and got back in the final expense again part-time. And then just basically resolved to do what was fundamental, the basics of the business, buying the right leads, selling them the right way, and I think just as important, consistently doing that. 'Cause sometimes we lose focus of where the path goes, and the rest is history. I went full-time after a year. My wife delivered twins the next weekend after I went full-time, quit the real job with the benefits and all. And
Burned the ships, man.
I sure did. So it's tough, but...
Chris, you always say that agents, one of the most crucial periods for agents, and I know Zach says this too, is when they start to have some success.
Oh, yeah.
And then they start stopping the things that actually got them success, and then they start trying to put their own fingerprints on it, cutting back on their investment to try to maximize return on fewer opportunities. You fell into that trap.
Oh yeah. No, it's the brain is getting in the way of what works, right? This is not a creative job. It's pretty boring. You just buy leads, you talk to people, you sell them. There's some interesting stuff that happens, when we see these people. But that's really simple, right? I mean, it's not any more complicated. But that's what makes it complicated, is because it's simple. We want to allow ourselves to experiment and play with what is otherwise a pretty simple rinse and repeat business. And I think if you think too much, then you might think yourself into failure. I think kind of like I did.
How many people do you think are impacted by that? That you see that work with you, because you recruit agents to work with the Ford Insurance Group, right?
Impacted by the creative thing getting in the way.
You see them come in, they enter, they start following, and then all of a sudden they go off track. Like what percentage would you say tend to go that direction?
I think most people fail before they get started. I think that's where most of the issues. Just getting people to the swing the bat at the plate is the biggest problem in this business. A smaller problem is swinging it consistently. I don't think it happens that much. I think maybe partially because it was my experience, and I yell at my agents, figuratively speaking, don't do what I did. I remind them of making these dumb decisions I did.
Yeah.
So I don't see it a lot in my agency as much for those people who have had success, because they know my story, and hopefully that had an impact. But I know it happens a lot. People get off of what works, and like you said, they look at the business like, oh, I can save money by not investing, and then they start to also lose revenue and profitability.
The one thing we do talk about, it's pretty interesting in this market, is the entire insurance business is built on large numbers.
Right.
The entire business. And the two areas where agents really struggle in believing that is in recruiting and leads.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, they're interested in the large numbers. Right?
Income-wise,
working in their favor. But then they start to, and we talk about in terms like a rocket taking off, and you got to break orbit, and you have to keep the gas down the whole way through orbit. Right. And if you don't, then gravity works against you.
Right. Yeah. The initial part is so critical, getting started, right? Getting that traction.
What got you out of the rut to say, I got to go back and try this again? Well, I mean, you had a bad experience in uniform.
Sure.
Well, maybe you weren't in a uniform, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't in uniform.
You might have been in uniform selling it. I don't know. But you obviously, clearly you didn't want to do that. And you're like, I'm going to go back and try this thing that I failed miserably at with no money in the bank. My wife's really going to get behind this.
Right.
What was that catalyst, and why did you go back to that specific market? Spinal expense, right, is how you got started? Mm-hmm.
And I went back to it.
And you went back to that.
Part of it is, there's a sense of destiny from my perspective on where I'm supposed to be. And it sounds a little arrogant, but the men in my life, my dad, my grandfather, and my uncle were all entrepreneurs. My dad sold a chemical business, made out very well before his 50s. My grandfather owned an industrial HVAC company in Detroit, did pretty good. And then my uncle Dave started XM Radio in part, and Air America, if you remember. Air America, yeah. So that was kind of like, the groundwork is laid. This is what you should do. You have this, it's in your blood.
Hold on a minute. We got to come to a complete stop. He said, my Uncle Dave started XM Radio, Air America. So, and then he just moved on. What?
Yeah.
Are you named after your uncle?
My dad. They're all Daves.
They're all
my
Daves.
Grandfather, uncle, and dad are all Daves.
Your dad's brother's named Dave?
Well, that's on my mom's side. Uncle
Okay.
Dave.
It's like a George Foreman type.
I know. I know. So, started XM Radio. What?
In part.
In part. Like, you can't just say something and then we're going to move on. I'm not anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. No, Uncle Dave, he was always big into radio, and he used to DJ the Loop, which is, I think, a radio station in Chicago.
Yeah.
He put together in part the day disco died in the 1970s. You remember the doubleheader in Wrigley Field?
I've never heard of this.
No.
Okay, so it's where you get in, you pay for a ticket.
Oh, yeah.
And you bring a vinyl of disco, because everybody said disco sucks.
Okay.
It's over. So they all bum rushed the field between the games and lit it on fire, and that was like the official day. And he had some part in this.
Disco died.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
So he's worked for Sony. He started XM Radio with the guy Abrams, I think is his name, who started it. But he was programmer, put all the stations together, the talent, that kind of thing. So so that's all kind of like In other words, that's where I come from.
You had a bunch of these innovators, entrepreneurs. people
Exactly.
working
Yeah.
themselves.
I gotta, carry the fire. Essentially, is kind of how I looked at it. And plus, it sucked working for somebody. Frankly, I never had a real job. I think that's important to understand. I had a personal training gym when I got out of college at 21. Worked for myself right away, and just working for, seeing people who were men in their 50s, miserable, not making bad money, but not great, and they were just constantly putting out fires, under constant stress, working 55, 60 hours a week, which is fine, but for what? Just to get by. And I thought, man, I don't want to be that guy in 10 years, 20 years from now. And I knew the insurance business had tremendous opportunity, and I didn't want to. I could do this. That's kind of what I thought. It's like, this is silly, and I knew what it was wrong when I had the time to reflect that it was my fault that I failed. It wasn't anybody else's. It wasn't the prospects. It was my fault.
You mean it wasn't the leads?
Wasn't the leads. No.
I do have a question for you. First, I want you to know we have a lot in common because my personal trading business didn't take off either. So I don't know why we're laughing at that, but I just had to say it. And then the second part of that, I need a break. No. That moment, I think a lot of agents deal with this, and I've seen agents, we've had conversations with agents who stepped out, had to take a breather. They had some personal stuff happen.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
maybe they did what you did as far as like try to reinvent the wheel in certain ways, or the other part is, they quit when they shouldn't have, when they were 3 feet from gold, right?
Yeah.
And so we've had those conversations. But what does that conversation look like with your spouse? Because there may be agents who are listening to us now who are saying, man, I dropped the ball there. I do have to take ownership of this. And you're deciding to make this decision for you and your family. Was she pregnant at the time?
At what point when I started?
When you got back in, when you decided to go back in.
She had twins. Well, she just got pregnant with twins after I decided to go back in.
Right.
And she delivered the twins when I quit my job and went full time back.
Right. So
in
that's my
finance,
question is, what was like that conversation like with her in regards to?
Yeah,
Was it unconditional support? I believe in you,
no,
David.
No, man. No, it may sound sad, but I love my wife and she supports me 100% now. But I told Cody this, you're in situations as entrepreneurs where you have a vision, you see something, you believe in it, and guess what? Pretty much nobody else is either. Yeah. If you got one person who believes just as much as you're lucky, right? Like Jerry Maguire, I was watching that movie last night. How Renee Zellweger walked out with it. That normally doesn't happen. So you by yourself. Good luck. Nobody thinks you got anything.
Renee Zellweger's not following you.
No, sorry.
At least not now.
Yeah, you're right. So what
After
happens?
the plastic surgery. Was that after the plastic surgery? Or
It was before.
Before, yeah. Okay, go.
So what happens is my wife, we did a video and it was kind of, the whole video was like, that's right, I didn't support you, Dave. Because then it was on. So I decided, as the man of the house, that this is what the vision was going to be. And she went along with me, but she wasn't like, yay, final expense again after you flopped out, not just the first time, but your personal training business failed too.
Right.
She had no reason to believe in me.
Yeah.
And I don't hold it against her. I had that too. But I'd made a decision that for me, and I knew ultimately for my family, that doing this path again was the way to go. And I have to prove it through execution. And it eventually caught on.
And it sounds like you had a path, or at least a plan. You were doing it part-time. Is that right?
Yeah, both times. When I first started, when I got back in after the first failure.
Okay. Wow.
Chris started part-time. So both of your stories are very similar.
Very similar.
And he was scared to take his foot off that pedal over there. He was scared.
That was very difficult for me.
Yeah.
Going to full time?
Yeah.
Really?
Going into full-time. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's the point to where Roger had the conversation with me. He's like, Chris, do you know how much it's costing you? Do you know how much it's costing you to stay at your job? And
Yeah.
It's like, well, I did the math.
We ran the numbers.
Yeah.
He was making more in part-time doing life insurance sales, final expense, same market you're in, than he was in his full-time job.
Well, it's a mindset change. I mean, we're bred, I think, to have benefits,
Yes.
have guarantees, which they really aren't.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship it's simple, yet it's complicated. It's you're going out there every morning unemployed. You got to go find somebody to sell something to. And that's scary.
Yeah.
So
I think that's an important conversation, man, and I hope our listeners are hearing it. Of sometimes when you have a vision for your life, you have to be brave,
Yeah.
and step out, regardless of who's with you.
Do we get a Disney song
that's a
playing
tough
right
move.
here now?
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's one in there.
Yeah, no, my head's spinning with all these extra things that need to come into play right here. Yeah, you do need to be brave.
And think that one decision changed everything, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For both of us.
But maybe at the time it wasn't a big deal. That decision go part-time or that decision go full-time.
Right.
Like it's funny, the big things you look back in your life, it was that one decision to, for me, take my last credit card and buy direct mail with. That's what I did. I had 4 others maxed out.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I can just max out and go bankrupt, or I can give this a shot. So, yeah.
So there's
I'll give myself a shot.
There's kind of a game there too of, what's the worst that could happen? And you're saying the worst that could happen is I go bankrupt.
Yeah, most millionaires do at some point.
That's key to it.
true.
Like,
Or had at one point.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's
And
the
they're
worst that could
willing,
happen?
and they're willing to actually say, it was interesting because when we were moving from Canada, and we were just sharing the story, when we were moving from Canada to the U.S., and my first business in the U.S. was a publishing company. I probably talked about it on our channel before. We moved from Toronto, or where I met my wife, to Louisville, Kentucky, and we started a Yellow Pages publishing company in 2001. And came down here, no money in the bank, on a whim and a prayer, because of an opportunity. Now, I was successfully helping launch another company as an employee in Canada, a U.S. company that was launching in Canada. I saw the business inside out. It was very simple. I knew we could duplicate it. I came to the U.S. to start, and we get 6-8 months down the road, and now it's time to make a decision to move my family from Toronto to New Albany, Indiana, which is right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky.
Yep.
And we made an offer to buy a house. And before we actually moved in, the bank deal fell through because I didn't have the right visas, and couldn't pull it back. We were literally a week away from moving, a week away from school starting. It was all very precarious. We didn't have a lot of financial stability. I was having financial success, but I was paying off so many loans back in Canada. I was just starting to have success. And again, I came from a long line of entrepreneurs, or my dad was in my family. And I was willing to take a risk. But at that moment of decision, whether I was going to stay or go, like it's time to like, Roger, are you going to do this or not? Are you going to move your wife and children to another country to start something that you don't know if it's going to be successful or not? And I didn't know what to do. And I literally had my wife's dad, Chris McConville, come down with me to help me look for a place to live for us. And we looked around, and I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, if you don't take a shot on yourself now, you'll never know.
Yeah.
And then he said these words: what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen if you give this a shot and it doesn't turn out the way you think? He said, but what's the best thing that could happen? He said, so even though I don't want you to move because you have my 2 grandbabies and you're moving them away to another country, my only 2, he said, it would be selfish of me to say, stay home.
Right.
Because I see that you're trying to chase something, and I think you should at least give it 24 months. He said, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
Right.
You've got to go all in. What's the worst thing that could happen? And so I think a lot of people, if you're listening right now, you got to say, if you're in a place where you're struggling, or you've been struggling, or you're trying to decide whether you need to come into this business, or you're in a job or a career you just don't love, or you're not getting paid enough money, like you got to ask yourself, if you take this step, what is the worst thing that can possibly happen? You're not going to die, right? Here's what my father-in-law said. You can always move back to Toronto, and you can move into our house until you get it figured out. I'm like, well, that's the last thing I'd want to do. But
I was pretty bad after all.
I was like, but I'm not dead,
Right.
And I have a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? That's all I needed was just that little bit of a push. So inside, the voice inside of us says we can do it. But all the other external voices in your history and your past come screaming in.
A lot of men live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that I'm grateful for failing, is seeing that at the place that I worked. I mean, just these guys. I remember one guy's like, man, I hate this job, but I want to go work for TVA, which is a big federal employer in Tennessee, and benefits, the time off, good money.
Yeah.
And I remember driving down to Georgia selling leads, and like 3 or 4 years later, here he is in his truck still working there. I'm like, man,
Same
it's
one.
like, how could you be miserable for years? You know, I just like, that's why I wanted out of that. Because that's the compromise. And then there's regret if you have any sort of like semblance of achievement that you want.
So clearly you broke the cycle, you started to have success.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got back in, so when you realized, hey, I'm pretty good at this, how long was that period?
I always knew I was good at it. I mean,
I failed out twice before I got back in. I always knew I was good at it.
I just got away from what worked, you know, and my emotional maturity wasn't as good as it is now. I'm just in the 20s, right?
Yeah.
So I got good at it. I was pretty good at it, and as long as I was doing what I was supposed to, right? You know, buying leads, seeing the people, hitting the numbers weekly. So it was just a matter for me at the end of the day is doing what I should do and being consistent about it, you know, which are more, I think, character issues than skill set
what
issues.
was the benchmark for you to say, I'm actually having success? Financial, but production, where you're like, when you cross the threshold, you're like, that's the new benchmark for me. I'm going to push on from there. Like how did you measure your success? Was the amount of AP you were writing a month? Was the amount of earnings you were making on a monthly basis, an annual basis? How did you measure that for yourself in those early first couple of years when you got back in?
I think it was just getting back to zero. I had so much debt from credit cards from the last business. I owed my dad money for the insurance, not the insurance, the personal training gym.
Yeah.
I owed money on cars, and I cleared off most of that before, you know, I really accomplished. Well, I mean, I was accomplishing, but that was a big deal for me because I don't like debt, especially wasteful debt that doesn't serve anything. So that was a big deal to get out of that. That was kind of the first round of success for me, I'd say, is like, okay, good. I've like gotten out of these years of credit card debt, you know, and I'm back to zero. Yay. So that was probably, that was a big deal for me because for a long time I was crushed under that.
Was that big for your wife at that time? Was that a benchmark for her?
I think the benchmark for her was when we moved into a bigger house, and she's like, okay, this is nicer than the place you used to live. And, you know, that's what she said in our video. And she's like, yeah, okay, maybe there's something to this, you know? So,
yeah. At what point did you cross over from going, okay, I can do this, to I want to start teaching this? And what was the motivation behind that?
I think for me, early on, from a business standpoint, you know, one's the loneliest number in business. One of anything is a benchmark or is a bottleneck. And it's an interesting contrast because you want to focus because putting blinders on and going all in is imperative. However, it is good to differentiate streams of income. So for me, I looked at it like, okay, where do I want to be long-term from here? Do I want to do Medicare? Cross-sell Medicare. That's a residual income product. It's passive income. Mm-hmm. Or I like training. Better personal training, Jim. I like agents, I think. Not sure about that. We're going to see. But I looked at the market and realized, pretty much everybody recruits like in an MLM fashion. So maybe I'll have a little angle here with kind of like a no BS approach with my brand. So I decided to go the route of training. That was about close to 3 years in where I went all into that.
What year was that?
2014. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just started recruiting and doing that whole thing. And I looked at that as another line of business because it's, you know, I can go sell, I can go work, but to get that guy to go sell, yeah, we'll see, you know. Right. And it's semi-passive, you know, it's another way to create a stream of income. Point is, I wanted to just do more than just one thing. I felt there was some element of risk in it.
For me, taking content, making it publicly available, just seemed like it was something that we should do, you know, for the industry. Because the industry gave us so much.
Right. And we actually started a podcast before. I can't remember the name of it. It was like Doug Goods. We'll call it Doug Goods. I don't remember. Was it Swaggy? Was that the first iteration?
I think so. Swaggy says.
And we started to pick up listeners, but it was for...
I remember that one.
And it started to gain following.
Well, we actually started an internal podcast for our own agency. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a podcast. Well, it was weird because we had this training call that we did every Wednesday morning. And then people would say, well, where do I get the recording? I missed it, or I had a new agent. And so then we were like, well, we got to put this somewhere. So we actually opened a SoundCloud account and we started housing them in SoundCloud.
Yeah.
And then I saw our subscriptions outgrowing the number of agents we had on SoundCloud. And I'm like, how is this possible? And then, but we weren't promoting it. We weren't distributing it. It wasn't going through any distribution model. We weren't using Anchor or Libs, none of the distribution models used for podcasts. Like, how is this happening? Well, other people are finding us on the internet and listening to our internal training calls. And I'm like, there is something to this. And then we launched Swaggy Sales and was like, that's really not us.
Right.
We launched it, got it up on the, but he remembers that.
Yeah, we had some fun with it.
Yeah, so that got some attention, but we did have some fun. And we realized it was hard to really create a brand that was telling stories every day about our lives. And we're like, that's not what we want. But the business gave so much to us. I just thought, if you put enough good content out there, you'll find people that align with you. And there's so many people that need a life-changing opportunity like this business.
Sure.
And so, man, I've got to commend you. You've been one of the most consistent content producers in the space, probably providing more value from the no BS approach to everything. Here's what this carrier is good at. Here's what they suck at.
Right.
Here's what this lead is good at and here's what it sucks. And this is what Medicare can do, and here's what it can't do. I mean, you break stuff down in such, it's just really, really raw, good content. I can't imagine how many people you've impacted. What has that done for you from growing your agency, from you starting to share and teach? What does the agency look like today as a result of the YouTube channel?
Several hundred producing agents, final expense Medicare mostly, some annuity, some ACA. Really just strictly off of YouTube.
Just a YouTube marketer.
I mean, I do a lot. If you do Google search and you do some search terms you do in YouTube, you'll see my written blog content there. I do get good traffic from that.
How often are you doing that content?
Not as much as I used to. And because when you rank in Google, it stays there. You don't have to keep creating the same content or redoing it. You can, but YouTube's just better because what you get with YouTube is a celebrity-like appeal. In like a niche, so people know who you are before you talk to them. I'm just thinking of myself as a regular dude. They think you're something else, but they've already.
I mean, my hands are sweaty.
I know. So, they're sold on you before they see you.
Yeah.
And so, from a recruiting standpoint, I would much rather, like we were talking about, talk to people who already know, like, and trust me.
Yeah.
It's nice, man. It's like I don't have to sit here and sell them on why final expense is nice or whatever. Or like I'm a good guy, Oh yeah, well they see my content, they believe that. I don't have to tell them that.
And they know you're valid. That you can walk the walk.
I always thought too, the more you give, the more you receive. I think that's a fundamental tenet.
True.
And that's thankfully something. At first, I had a problem with. I was like, one other guy in our space was putting content out, and I was like, why is he giving this stuff away for free? It's crazy. And I was like, but that could be the single most genius thing ever because. The problem I think a lot of us have, understandably, is skepticism, cynicism. There's a lot of that arguably deserved in this business. And if you could become something other than that, or the answer to that, some percentage of those viewers will become business, which has worked out. But it's a consistency thing. You have to stay with it.
What would you say to new agents about an agent who wants to transition from selling final expense, Medicare, one of the markets that you're in, to actually growing an agency? Do you train them to go start a YouTube channel?
I would. It works, and there's plenty of opportunity in it. I don't think it's nearly tapped out. I've got some agencies that do that. In fact, they're creating content. They self-generate their own leads. They don't have to cold call list or any of that crazy stuff. They don't have to recruit friends and family if they don't want to. I'm 100% behind that. The one thing I will say though is if you're going to do agency building, just make sure that you understand who you want to recruit, you know who's a good fit, and understand you're co-signing a bunch of debt, so you're on hook if that guy rolls up 5, 10, 15, 20 grand. Ain't fun. So be prepared to find good people.
I'm sure you've never dealt with that.
Everybody's been in it long enough has, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we do talk about that in terms of alignment of who we are and our core values and what we're looking for. And we try to have that.
Like an avatar of who we want. Yeah, it's really important.
So Dave, in this conversation, you talked about some of the videos and the content that you're creating, but you've talked a lot about the fundamentals.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about this too, you know, in regards to what's his name from UCLA? What's the coach? Wooden. And he taught his guys how to tie their shoelaces before every game. And they're like, what are you talking about? You know, and he's giving them this explanation of why it's so important to tie your shoes because it affects the entire team. Whatever. Sure. But those are fundamentals, right? Basics. So can you talk about those things, those basics, the important pieces, the fundamentals to being able to sell successfully?
Yeah, your go-to repertoire for what it takes to be successful in business.
Again, like this business is simple, but that's what makes it complicated. You know, this business is all about seeing the people, and you've got to have a form to see the people, leads,
right?
And you've got to have the work ethic, and it's just the consistent application of that from day to week to month to year, that over the course of many steps and many presentations, you arrive at an income. That's pretty simple. It's not really more complicated than that, except it is when you get into the details. You've been cursed out or door slammed in your face, or your wife doesn't think your profession is the best for you, you know, or for the family. And you got all this kind of head stuff that's going on. You've got to stick to the fundamentals. I think that's where good coaching, mentorship, support, a good team helps kind of, you know, keep that boat afloat through that, you know, tough times. But that's fundamentally, again, I don't have anything real profound to say about the fundamentals. The fundamentals never really are.
Fundamentals, right? They never are. It's really basic stuff, and we want it to be more than it is.
Correct. Right.
That's the tough part.
Right.
When you talk about seeing the people, is there a number?
I think 15 completed presentations a week for final expense agents, Medicare agents too. That's the number you should non-negotiably do every week. If you're full-time. 15.
What's the expected closing rate out of 15?
Half would be great. Some do better, some do a little worse. I think you can work with those numbers though.
7 to 8 applications?
Be great.
What's the average AP?
If they follow my script, 800, give or take.
Yeah. So $5,000 to $6,000, $7,000 a week in production?
Yeah. I mean, if I get 30 direct mail leads and spend $1,200, invest
There you go.
$1,200.
Yeah.
Big mistake there. I want to see 5,000 to 6,000. It's a 4-to-1 return on investment. But I can scale that, and that's the thing. You know, I used to be obsessed with, I got to close at 30% or convert 30% of my leads or 35% of my leads, like so-and-so agent. But then it dawned on me, you know, whatever your numbers are, like in baseball, you can have good numbers as long as you're swinging the bat, right?
Correct.
So whatever your numbers are, hopefully for me, conversion rate 20 to 25% of your direct mail leads or half your presentations. If you can maintain that number at 15 appointments, you want to make more money, well, do 20, 30, 50 a week.
Right.
That's what all the guys who are doing a lot of money or a lot of business are doing, in my experience, is they're working like crazy. And that's what it takes. If you want to have an extraordinary income, you got to have an extraordinary work ethic.
Right.
But the fundamentals don't change.
And it's usually the same numbers. Like even if you're ordering more leads, you're still going to hit about 4 times your investment.
I think so. I think you could somewhere in that range. Everybody's different. There are agents who do well
Different skill
above that.
levels.
Yeah. Again, all you have to do is be good enough, and then scale good enough. That's simple.
So, how do people get in touch with you? Other than find you on YouTube, which is
Go
everywhere.
Go to YouTube.
Which is everywhere. I Google life insurance sales.
Put in final expense in the YouTube.
David and Cody. He wants me to put in final expense. you rank higher?
I don't know.
I don't know.
He knows. He knows his stuff.
DavidDuford.com.
DavidDuford.com. Or go to your YouTube channel.
Yep.
At David Duford.
Yep. Just throw David Duford in. You'll
I
get
think there's at least 10 videos up. 10?
in the last
Okay.
week, maybe. Yeah.
10?
How many videos?
You need a jingle.
1,500 plus.
Do you have a jingle yet?
1,500
A jingle?
plus.
Yeah, you need a jingle.
I don't have a jingle.
Like,
He's getting ready to do one for you.
yeah, like
Go, Chris.
David Duford Insurance. We're going to sell you good.
Yeah.
Do you like it? You can use it, buddy.
It's terrible. Nice try.
I'm working on it. You only have to be good enough, remember?
Yeah, that ain't good enough.
David, thanks for being
Thank you.
on, man.
Thanks
It's been
for
a pleasure having you.
Appreciate it.
And for those of you joining for the first time, it's always a pleasure being with you. And I hope you learned something today from this guy who's been in the business. I want to say he's kind of
Rocking
at
it
that legend status. Check him out on YouTube, find him, and you can connect with us at lifeinsuranceacademy.org. Check out any of our social media. We'd love to help in any way we can. Go be a difference maker. Have a great day. We'll see you in the next episode of the Life Insurance Academy podcast.